I don't know if you guys knew this, but years ago, there was a Sonic X reanimated collab. I got to turn Sonic X, a scene from Sonic X, into a Junio inspired scene, which I was thrilled to do. So here's the original. I'll show you. Here's the original. Can we? Okay. All right. Please, even if you like Sonic X, can you please admit whatever is going on underneath his legs is disgusting? What is that? It's so gross. Cool scene though, really fun. Here's the Junio version. I'll even use the retro filter on it so you know it's authentico. Pretty fun. So with that being said, we set the tempo, we set the expectations, and it's time to get into it. I realized it's been about 4 years since I did a proper How to Draw the Right Way. So I thought it would be really fun to kind of do it the old-fashioned way, the way I did it like almost 8 years ago, and go through the styles leading up to the current style that we're at. And then I will show you a breakdown video, or rather a breakdown process of how to think about the shapes. And then I will draw Sonic X, that style, the anime, in a new pose, which you guys voted on. And it's going to be a Sonic Adventure 1 CG model pose, which I think is appropriate. Then I will show you how to color, render, cel shade like Sonic X. All right, something to take notes with. Hold up. Sorry, guys. We're just getting into it. I'll just use my basic ultimate sketch pencil available in my Gumroad brush pack. Clips to your paintbrushes for free in my Gumroad, link in description. Totally free. Do not need to credit me at all, or attribution required. So starting off with numero uno, we have the El Clásico, the Sonic the Hedgehog from 1991. Moving on, we have Sonic the Hedgehog from 1992, which is Sonic 2 art, right? We see a few differences here. One, Sonic got taller, his head shrunk just a bit. Body got also, well, actually, no, his head didn't get smaller. His body got smaller. And then they made his legs taller. Right after that, around the same time, we had the Sonic CD art come out, which is, again, we already see a little bit different change. Maybe it's just a difference in expression. It's all quite similar. Something about it looks different, though. I think it's the spike. I think it's the way the spikes are drawn. But there's very, very similar designs here. And now we have Sonic from Sonic 3. He's gone back to having a slightly larger head, shorter legs, but it could just be this one particular instance of art. We're not going to get too picky about it. This is all roughly the same thing. And then we have Sonic Jam in 1997. I think this is the first Uekawa image of Sonic. And we begin to see Sonic is starting to move into more noodly, elastic territory. Just the way things move, the gestural way his limbs arc, and particularly the way that his eyes went from being really tall. I mean, look how tall, how much space his eyes take up. Now they're much shorter, much smaller muzzle. Distance between the ears and the top of the eyes is also increased quite a bit. So all in all, like if you just compare the facial real estate, it's moving around quite a bit compared to the rest. Jam is a totally perfect sweet spot for a classic cut like myself and someone who really likes modern Sonic. It's just a great solution and compromise for Sonic to still look exactly like Sonic and please, I think, both sides of the fandom, truly. I think this could work in 2D or 3D perfectly fine. Jam is kind of peak, it's kind of Kino, it's kind of cinema. Then we have the first explorations of what would become the Sonic Adventure style Sonic. And you can see, again, Uekawa is starting to make Sonic really noodly, really elastic, really kind of just gestural. And he's playing around with the elements on his face a lot more. Sonic's face is much smaller. Look at that head. That head is much smaller. His body is very elongated by comparison compared to like this here, where quick difference. The head is much larger in classic than adventure moving forward. I don't know what this is, but it's something. The art style for it in particular, the way that it's rendered, is very nostalgic, classic, iconically Sonic. Then we move on to Sonic Adventure 2, and already we see some changes happening. I would say it's a degradation, to be perfectly honest. I like the larger head that Sonic Adventure 1 is going for here, with the smaller body, and here his head gets even smaller and his body gets larger. I mean, all of this stuff, like the larger hands, the larger feet, it's kind of like a perspective thing, really, but there is some exaggeration going on here from Uekawa. And then we move into the Sonic Advance series, which is where we kind of see modern Sonic land is really here in Sonic Advance from 2001, 2004. This is clearly a direct evolution from one to another. And here we end up, this is 2004, so Sonic Advance was a little bit later than Sonic X, because Sonic X showed up in 2003, and the only artist that I could find who actually did any character designs on the show was Satoshi Hideyama, and he handled all the character design. Think of it as like his take on Iwakawa. That's what he did for Sonic X. And so we end up with this style here. And what we end up here is actually kind of more return to form Sonic Adventure 1 more than anything. His shoes also get a lot rounder here in Sonic Advance, and they kind of go back to being a little bit more pointed, but they're still quite round, and obviously they're not the soap shoes. So that's where we land here in this mess of designs, to be perfectly frank. Like, how did we go from this to this? Boggles the mind. You know what? I have an idea. I know what will fix this design real quick. I think if you made the spikes more like this, just hear me out, hear me out. You don't even know where this is going yet. And then if you took the eyes, right? And you made them look like this, and then get rid of this butt right here. Get rid of the butt eye. Let's liquefy this. You know, I think this is definitely an improvement. And then the shoes, you know, the shoes really need like something like this, you know, something a little bit more, I don't know, just reminiscent of a certain style of Sonic. I can't put my finger on it though. And it's not perfect, but you know, we're getting a little bit closer to something that resembles Sonic the Hedgehog, you know what I'm saying? So we have our two drawing refs here. You guys voted on these two. You voted that the Sonic Adventure 1 pose shown here is gonna be superior for Sonic X. So for starters, we have a circle here. And then his body is actually more of a bean shape. So we get that more modern design where his body's more of a bean shape, okay? With another circle inside of it. A couple of tubes or cylinders for his legs. And the interesting thing about these is they're not just like straight cylinders. They kind of taper very slightly at the tops and bottoms. So they kind of do that. Like if I were to exaggerate, that's kind of more of this shape that they make. And you can see this as they kind of connect to the body, they like melt into his body, and then they kind of barely taper into his shoes just a little bit. That's just interesting note, but they're just cylinders for simplicity's sake. Shoes are pretty straightforward, right? We have this classic shape here. Classic shape for his socks. These are like a spheroid, like, I don't know, it's like an oval in 3D, but they're like cut in half. And then that's the shoe here. Tracing is really helpful for just understanding the basics. This curvature here comes way farther down than most other designs of Sonic. It just droops. His spikes just droop, and if you want to kind of capture them in a shape, they go like that. You know, so off his head, just down, droop, and then 1, 2, 3. So they droop quite a bit. And again, his ears are taller than classic. So if you follow my other tutorials, his ears in this style in particular, you can see here, they go up quite tall, and then they're also kind of droopy. They kind of flop a little bit, floppy. Let's talk about the facial real estate of this Sonic X design. As we say with the other classic Sonic design sort of rule about his muzzle is sort of the center point of the sphere. Just imagine we're actually creating a line through the sphere like that. And then his ears don't really go past it. Although, again, because this is 2D, there's some liberty, so his ears are actually kind of tilted a little off of the sphere a bit. Make another cut up here, and this is the entire facial real estate of him. So we don't want to put his eyes, his eye mask too high or too low. If you get the proportions correct, you can nail the design. And that's true of actually all drawings. Sonic X follows, of course, a circle. Go around the circle. And they add the butt, man. There's just, that's just the butt eyebrow. There's no other way to describe it. Butt eyebrow is just, you don't put a butt on Sonic. You put it on everyone else, okay? Everyone else gets a butt, but Sonic. And then just classic ellipse eyes with green in them, of course. And this muzzle is actually not as gestural as other Sonic designs. There's kind of like a stiffness to it right here. And then we get this Sonic Adventure cheese smile here. How can we translate this into a new pose? So the pose for Sonic, we have circle here. We want to indicate contour lines for where the direction of the sphere is. So the contour lines for this are going to be approximately where his nose and eyes meet. The shape of the body is about the same shape as these modern Sonic renders. So we're just going to use that. Boom, baby. Okay, boom. Just get this gesture going on. Get this bean shape going on. You know what I'm saying? Just a little bean shape. Here we go, right here. Boom. Actually, let's do it a little bit more like that. A little gesture. Get these legs coming down like that. Get those legs coming down. We'll get this tail coming down. Spikes coming down. Hand coming down. I'm just marking off. We're just marking off. So since they have this odd angle here, we're gonna add it as well. Boom, boom. That. actually make them a bit smaller. Make sure the legs meld into his body a little bit, you know. Have this shoe come down. They're a bit not as pointy, not as round. They're kind of just a meh, you know, just kind of a meh. And he's got tiny little sole to the shoe. Just a tiny little sole. His leg is almost right behind it. Here we go. Let me see the bottom here. Boom, boom, boom. Just gesture. Just focus on gesture, getting things in place. Don't worry too much about stylization accuracy yet. We're just placing things. We're placing things in space, you know what I'm saying? That's all we got to worry about. So let's make sure that those curves and gestures are there. Really show and emphasize the droopy, swoopy nature of his spikes. And as for hands, I did a whole video on how to capture the shape of hands, which you guys should check out on my channel. I think it's an underrated video on my channel, but I actually think some of the tips I go over and then the live demonstrations I do are really gonna help you understand how to draw hands more quickly and gesturally, and I recommend you check that out. I'm gonna start with just a circle for the hand, put a line out to capture the first limb over here, or the first appendage, and then the second one. And then we're gonna just swoop and kind of assume this whole shape here is sort of the hand. And then the thumb comes down here. Boom. And then we kind of have his backside of his palm there. They've always been very anatomical. Just, you can see the joints. So we want to keep that in place. And his backhand, so I'm going to put this over his body like that. Might be a bit big. I'm going to reduce the size of it just a tad. And the back here is just a simple, and he's just doing a fist. We'll just do a simple fist. You know what? We're gonna push this in. We're gonna push that in. Ooh, that's the difference maker right there. Oh, baby. I think we're gonna lower his muzzle a bit because his muzzle isn't as, it's not as tall, I would say, as it's a nice medium, you know? He's got a bit of a medium muzzle like that. Just don't know what the corners of his mouth would look like. But that's all right. We'll just make it up. Who cares? And the butt of his eyebrows basically almost touch his muzzle. And then there's, he's got quite a thick brow. Ultimately, this first head that I did, it was just kind of a bust. It just did not end up looking anything like Sonic X or the concept art. This back spike actually, or this bottom spike is quite long as well. I think it would actually just droop. We're gonna redraw this face, okay guys? We're getting rid of this face. Garbage. Restart. Fresh slate. So instead of doing the exact 3/4 view that the original Sonic Adventure model is using, I went for more of this almost committed completely to the left side of his head completely turning. And that ended up looking a lot better, especially with reference used. I just thought, oh, that is Sonic X right there. So really, really flat forehead. Never see more than 3 spikes in Sonic X if I have my way with it. Maybe we can do like a bit more. So we kind of separate the two a bit more. Again, just gestural, just placing things. I think this is already looking much better, you know? More curvature here. Redraw it until it looks okay, all right? Do not just settle. If it doesn't look right the first time, that's okay. Just redraw it. Much better. This is definitely going the right direction with it. Just a couple more references. I mean, look how much better we're drawing this guy. I think that's gonna do it. So now we have kind of our sketch here. I'm drawing at 4K resolution, by the way. That's just, what is that? 3840 by 2160, 72 DPI, I think. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna create on a vector layer, we're gonna create some lines, okay guys? We just hit vector layer up here. In the layers panel, new vector layer. I'm gonna drag it above my sketch. So these are like pen drawings. You can tell these are like inked. A little roughness to them. What could we do? What could we do to mimic that just a bit? I'm gonna teach you guys a technique right now, okay? You ready? If you go into the pen's subtool details and you go down to the brush tip, brush shape, you can apply the brush shape and it saves it as a preset that you can then apply to vector paths. So check this out. What we're gonna do is actually just use my basic rapidograph to line everything. And then we're gonna apply the rough brushstroke over everything. So like I said, I'm gonna use a vector layer to start creating my lines. And I'm just gonna use this simple rapidograph pen from my Clip Studio Paint brush pack. It's effectively just a round brush with a slight opacity adjustment at the end, but this is what I use to line all my Sonic Freedom work and basically anything animation related. This is like my animation cell brush. And the reason that we're gonna do it again on vector layers is one, we can resize the vector layers. So if we want to make the brush thicker or thinner, we can do that with a vector layer. And then the second thing is we're going to apply a toothy rough pen look over this base default hard round brush look. So we can get kind of that toothy traditional look that Sonic X has because it was traditional lines on paper. And so they kind of have more of a toothy traditional feel and more of that natural brush look. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are done. We're actually going to keep the base line art and duplicate it and then go to your operation, select everything, go to your brush shape and select the rough pen that we now applied. And would you look at that? It looks like an ink drawing now. Make sure you set one layer to reference. We're gonna set this to refer multiple reference layer. Area scaling, sure, we can do 3. I had a green background just so I can see what hasn't been filled in yet because Sonic has the color white on him in quite a few places, and so coloring on a white background or even a mid-tone background, sometimes you can miss those things. So something really bright and kind of abrasive is helpful for seeing colors that you've missed or areas that you haven't gotten yet. Originally, I was just gonna color pull from these cells that I have on the side and then use an overlay or soft light layer using black and white to create the shadows and highlights. But the shadows and highlights are actually very specific colors, so I ended up just color picking from them and then using the lasso fill to create shapes along the front and back sides of Sonic. And the lasso fill is one of my favorite tools in Clip Studio Paint for quickly just creating shapes, laying down color, laying down cel shading, blocking in shadows. I did it in my Team Dark video where that was how I blocked in shadows initially. I've done it for animation work, for creating effects, for shadows and highlights. Just a great tool overall. Also, Sonic X is not really affected by directional light. So this highlight to his spikes kind of goes all the way around him. It shows up on his back, it shows up in the front. The only thing that's really affected by light are the shadows. So the shadows of his spikes, which I put on a new layer beneath the highlights, and then the shadows of his muzzle, all that stuff is affected by like a general directional light in the scene. It's not very strong, it's not very clear where light is coming from. So like even in the reference, you can see Sonic has a highlight on his knee, and then he also has a highlight on the back of his spike, which is just lighting that doesn't really make a lot of sense. But we're rolling with it. And so this is why I keep reference handy, is because it's super helpful for actually nailing down a style correctly. So if you don't know how to draw something and you don't know how to draw a style correctly, use reference. This is a very, very simple style. It's just a cel shaded look, 3-tone cel shaded look. This is very easy to replicate. The hardest part about this actually for me was making sure Sonic actually looked like he belonged in the TV show, which I think I ended up doing a pretty good job on. I'm very happy with this. I think I did a good job explaining the style and then showing how it can be translated into a new pose. So after I acquired new reference, then the piece started to come together. Then the style of Sonic X really started to come through. And then I go into like a bit of a detail pass based on feedback from chat where maybe the fill bucket didn't fill everything in correctly. And so I have to go in and color small corners of Sonic very specifically, kind of pixel perfect type stuff. And then I also add a little darkness to his teeth to kind of show like maybe there's an ink bleed there. And that is how you draw Sonic X, Sonic the right way. Hopefully you learned something new. If you did, like, subscribe, share with your friends, check out my Gumroad. So that's gonna be it. I think this piece was pretty successful at nailing the style of Sonic X. If you agree, or if you learned something, like that Clip Studio Paint vector layer brush tip, be sure to subscribe, check out my other content, which is catered towards burgeoning artists and fellow Sonic fans. So if that defines you, check out my other content. And until next time, go and make good art.